Welcome back, those of you still with us. I hope you had a nice Christmas and were able to celebrate it with your family and friends. For many, it was a painful reminder of the tremendous loss we face every year. And be safe on New Year's Eve. Alcohols and guns goes together as well as popcorn and movie theaters. Today, we continue the mission of documenting gun violence, where we first go over the weekly statistics and then highlight the deadliest shootings of the week. The cases today range from a man taking out his anger on his local HOA to 2 teenage brothers mistakenly shot and killed because the perpetrator thought they were responsible for injuring his dog. If you appreciate these videos, please leave a like and subscribe for weekly updates on gun violence in America. Let's get into it. From November 10th to November 16th, there were at least 545 recorded shootings across the United States, where 257 were killed and 406 injured. Among the dead were 23 children, the youngest of which was 2 years old. By state, Texas led the country in fatalities with 27, followed by California with 24. Georgia and Florida recorded 14 each. By city, Chicago, which had more shootings than 39 other states, and Houston each recorded 6 deaths. Los Angeles, New Orleans, and Dallas each had 5. It's not all doom and gloom, however. There were a few states who managed to avoid shootings altogether. This week's No Shooting Award goes to Delaware, Hawaii, Idaho, Maine, Montana, and Vermont. Honorable mentions go to Alaska, Connecticut, and South Dakota. That does it for this week's numbers. Now moving on to the cases. Number 10. Prosser, Washington. Saturday evening in rural Benton County came early. By around 5:30 p.m., the sun had already set north of Prosser, and traffic along North Rothrock Road was light. Around that time, a vehicle crash was reported at the intersection. A caller told 911 they had heard yelling at the scene, followed by gunfire. Deputies were dispatched at approximately 5:34 p.m. When responders arrived, they found 2 vehicles stopped near the roadway. One person was already dead. The second died at the scene after emergency crews attempted life-saving measures. Investigators later determined the 2 people involved were in a domestic relationship and had been traveling in separate vehicles. According to the Benton County Sheriff's Office, one vehicle deliberately struck the other before the shooting. After the crash, 40-year-old Jose Luis Barrera Carrasco shot 39-year-old Annie Ruvalcaba Barrera. He then turned the gun on himself. A 6-year-old child was inside one of the vehicles during the incident. Authorities confirmed the child was not physically injured. Investigators have not publicly clarified which vehicle the child was in. The Benton County Sheriff's Office classified the shooting as a domestic violence-related murder-suicide and said there was no threat to the public at the time. The Major Crimes Unit took over the investigation, and autopsies were scheduled the days following the incident. Ruvalcaba Barrera was a mother of 5 and worked at Prosser Memorial Hospital as a cardiopulmonary technician. As of this recording, the investigation remains ongoing. Number 9. Grover Beach, California. Early Saturday morning in Grover Beach, the blocks around North 3rd Street were still and dark. Most of the single-story apartments tucked between North 3rd and North 2nd sat quiet as the night carried past midnight. Around 1 a.m., police were sent to the 300 block of North 3rd Street after reports of gunfire inside one of the residences. By the time police reached the home, the shooting had already ended. Inside the home, they found 2 people dead from gunshot wounds, and there were no indications that anyone else had been involved. The location sat in an alleyway behind the street, shielded from traffic and largely out of view. Detectives secured the area and began documenting the interior where the bodies were found, while officers confirmed there were no immediate danger to the surrounding neighborhood. The 2 people were later identified as 28-year-old Owen James Westner and 24-year-old Emily Lauren Riley. Police said the incident was being investigated as an apparent murder-suicide. Officials did not publicly identify who fired the shots, and no further details about what led up to the shooting were released. With no outstanding suspects and no threat to the public, detectives cleared the scene later that morning as the investigation continued. Number 8. Lacey, Washington. On Friday, November 14th, it was a cold and wet night in Lacey, with temperatures in the high 40s. Sometime after 1 a.m., 2 brothers, 16-year-old Alexander Borgen and 17-year-old Devin Borgen, were walking north along the roadway, heading home. Surveillance video later pinned the movement down to the minute. At about 1:36 a.m., a light-colored rented SUV turned right onto northbound College Street and came up behind them. The brothers paused to let it go by, then kept walking in the same direction. The SUV looped back around with its headlights darkened, then returned northbound around 1:45 with the lights back on. Within the next minute, the camera caught the attack, rapid shots ripping out from the front passenger side as the SUV drove alongside them and kept moving. Calls started coming in around 1:50 a.m., shots fired and people down. Responding units found both brothers lying in the roadway, unresponsive with apparent gunshot wounds. Officers and medics tried life-saving measures there on College Street, but both were pronounced dead at the scene. Investigators recovered 26 spent 9mm casings from the roadway, and the evidence on camera and on the pavement lined up with a drive-by. Court documents later alleged the gunfire came from a handgun modified to fire fully automatically, with roughly 24 rounds fired from the front passenger side while another man drove. Prosecutors identified the alleged gunman as Traquan Trinell Wilson Mason, a 20-year-old Lacey resident, and the alleged driver as 20-year-old Jaden H. Johns of Olympia. Wilson Mason told investigators he thought Alexander was someone else, someone he blamed for an October 2024 shooting at his home that injured his dog, and claimed that he didn't intend to shoot Devin. Investigators also pointed to an early unrelated February case in which police recovered multiple firearms from Wilson Mason, including a Glock 22 handgun that he said was also illegally modified, despite him being prohibited from possessing firearms. Wilson Mason was arrested days later after investigators tracked him from Lacey to a hotel in Wenatchee, where he was taken into custody without incident. The driver was taken into custody later that week after a brief multi-agency pursuit in Pierce County. Deputies tried to stop the rented SUV. It ran speeds over 100 miles per hour, and a pit maneuver ended with the vehicle rolling, ejecting the driver, who was later treated for minor injuries and booked once medically cleared. Both men are being held without bail pending arraignment. Number 7. Eureka Springs, Arkansas. On Friday, November 14th, Carroll County deputies were sent to a residence along West Highway 62, just east of Eureka Springs, for a welfare check. Inside, deputies found an elderly couple, 77-year-old Joy Bennett Wilmeth and 71-year-old Robert Leo Wilmeth, dead with apparent gunshot wounds. Arkansas State Police took over the homicide investigation, and the bodies were sent for autopsies. As investigators worked the scene, they learned this couple's son, Travis Lee McConnell, lived at the home with them but was not there. Also missing was Robert Wilmeth's Toyota Tacoma, which quickly became a central focus of the investigation. A bolo went out for McConnell and the vehicle, tying the missing truck to the search that followed. Information from outside the state quickly became part of the timeline. Investigators later learned McConnell was also a suspect in an assault in Missouri 2 days earlier. On November 12th, he allegedly rammed a female acquaintance with a truck believed to be the same one missing from the Arkansas scene and fired at her with a .22 caliber pistol. During that attack, investigators said he claimed that he had killed people in Arkansas. Using shared leads and local information, investigators tracked McConnell into Oklahoma. On the afternoon of November 14th at approximately 1:58 p.m., U.S. Marshals took McConnell into custody while he was driving Robert Wilmeth's truck. He was transported to a local detention facility, where authorities said he's being held on an outstanding felony warrant out of Missouri. Investigators from Carroll County and Arkansas State Police traveled to Oklahoma to interview McConnell and collect evidence. McConnell refused to be interviewed, but authorities reported recovering items including clothing and firearms. On Sunday, November 16th, Oklahoma officials notified Arkansas investigators that McConnell had been found deceased in his cell under circumstances authorities described only in the broadest possible terms. The Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation is investigating the in-custody death. Officials said the double homicide investigation remains open and ongoing, and that there's no indication of any continuing threat to the public. Number 6. Pasadena, Maryland. On Monday, November 16th, the afternoon in Pasadena was cool and quiet. Temperatures hovered in the low 60s as daylight faded over the Long Point community. Along Twickenham Road, a residential street lined with single-family homes, the day was otherwise ordinary. Just before 2 p.m., that quiet broke. According to investigators, gunfire erupted inside the home while emergency dispatches were already on the line. Court records later reveal that Jenna Hayes had called 911 as the confrontation was unfolding. On the call, she could be heard pleading with the man she addressed as Tony, repeatedly asking him not to shoot. Investigators said an argument over money could be heard involving another man she called Charlie. Moments later, gunshots could be heard on the call, followed by silence. Officers were dispatched to the scene for reports of a shooting. When they arrived, they found a married couple inside the home suffering from apparent gunshot wounds. The victims were identified as 54-year-old Jenna Hayes and 56-year-old William Hayes. Fire and rescue personnel attempted aid but pronounced both dead at the scene. Detectives quickly determined the shooting was not random. The Hayes operated a home improvement business out of the residence, and investigators said the suspect was known to the couple, with both personal and business ties. The attack was treated as targeted, and attention immediately shifted to identifying and locating the suspect. Within hours, investigators developed a suspect and a vehicle connected to the case. Police identified the suspect as 61-year-old Anthony Luis Reyes of Nottingham. Using shared investigative leads and vehicle tracking tools, officers located Reyes' car later that evening and attempted a traffic stop near the Severn Road and Bridge Road area. Reyes did not stop, instead he fled, leading officers on a pursuit along Interstate 97. The chase lasted several minutes and ended near Quarterfield Road exit, where Reyes was taken into custody after a brief struggle. One officer suffered minor injuries during the arrest. Reyes was later transported for medical evaluation before being booked. Police charged Reyes with first and second-degree murder and related offenses. Authorities said the incident was isolated and that there was no indication of any ongoing threat to the public. He's being held without bond, and the investigation remains active as detectives continue to process evidence and prepare the case for court. Number 5. Milwaukee, Wisconsin. On Sunday, November 16th, a cold evening was settling over Milwaukee's north side. In the Rufus King neighborhood, around West Congress Street and North 19th Place, neighbors were inside, porch lights were on, and traffic was light. Just after 7:30 p.m., shots were reported near the intersection. Investigators believe multiple rounds were fired. Neighbors described a rapid string of gunshots, and a doorbell camera several houses away recorded the sound of more than a dozen shots. What followed played out across two nearby blocks. On the 1900 block of West Congress Street, a 56-year-old man was found with a fatal gunshot wound. About a block away, on the 4300 block of North 19th Place, a 21-year-old man made it to a nearby home, pounding on a door and asking for help after being shot. A resident who answered said the young man leaned against the porch railing and told him that he had been hit. Police arrived within minutes and tried life-saving measures, but he died at the scene. The Milwaukee County Medical Examiner identified the victims as 56-year-old Devell Golson and 21-year-old Tommy Triggs, and ruled both deaths homicides. Police have said the two killings appear connected and treating the two scenes as part of the same incident. No suspect information has been released and no arrest has been announced. Detectives are continuing to process evidence, review nearby video, and interview potential witnesses. Police are asking anyone with information to contact Milwaukee police or submit tips anonymously as the investigation remains ongoing. Number 4. Knoxville, Tennessee. Before dawn on Sunday, Interstate 640 was mostly empty, lit only by overhead lamps and the occasional passing truck. According to Knoxville police, a vehicle traveling west on I-640 briefly pulled over onto the shoulder near Gap Road. Inside the SUV were 4 men traveling together through the city. Investigators believe that while the vehicle was stopped, one of the men opened fire on the other 3, then drove away from the scene in the same vehicle. Police said the motive for the shooting and the exact relationship between the suspect and the victims remain unknown. Officers were dispatched around 3:40 a.m. and arrived to find the 3 men suffering from gunshot wounds. 1 man was pronounced dead at the scene. 2 others were rushed to UT Medical Center for treatment. At the hospital, one of the wounded men later died from his injuries. The 3rd victim, a 22-year-old man from Detroit, remained hospitalized in critical condition, later described by police as critical but stable. The 2 men who were killed were identified as 33-year-old Troy Hutchinson of Atlanta and 25-year-old Roderill Jeter of Detroit. Police said the 3 victims were traveling from Detroit to Atlanta at the time of the shooting and had no known ties to the Knoxville area. Investigators said the suspect fled westbound in a light-colored, newer model Ford Bronco that police described as a rental vehicle carrying a Michigan license plate. Police issued regional alerts for the vehicle and said they believed the suspect and the SUV had left the Knoxville area. As the investigation continued, detectives located the Ford Bronco abandoned in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky. Knoxville police responded and took possession of the vehicle as evidence. Following an extensive investigation involving dozens of interviews, a review of cell phone records, and multiple anonymous tips submitted through Crime Stoppers, a Knox County grand jury returned a 17-count indictment against 27-year-old Deshaun Moten of Detroit in connection with the shooting. He faces multiple charges, including 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of felony murder, and 1 count of attempted first-degree murder related to the surviving victim. Police said Moten is not in custody and is believed to be in the Detroit area. Authorities continued to search for him, with Knoxville police requesting assistance from the U.S. Marshal Service. Number 3. Port Saint Lucie, Florida. On Monday, November 10th, around 3 p.m., the tropical east community in Port Saint Lucie was moving through a normal weekday, sun still up, temperatures in the upper 70s, and routine activity along the street. The shootings unfolded across multiple homes within minutes. A 62-year-old man walked through the neighborhood and went first to a nearby house where 54-year-old Mark Douglas Golden was in his garage. Golden was shot there and collapsed inside. The gunman then left on foot and went to a second home on the same street. There, 75-year-old David Walter Gassick was shot through a screen door and fell inside his residence. Police said there was no indication of any extended confrontation at either location. After shooting both men, the suspect crossed the street to a third house and entered through the garage and held the 77-year-old woman hostage at gunpoint. 2 firearms were observed inside the home. Police were called at about 3:15 p.m. for reports of shots fired and arrived within minutes, setting a perimeter as the incident centered on the third residence. Officers and crisis negotiators worked the scene for more than 2 hours. The hostage was eventually released unharmed, and the suspect remained barricaded alone inside. During the standoff, the woman reported that he had discharged his firearm in the direction of himself. When officers later entered, they found him with a gunshot wound to the chest. He was taken to a hospital and pronounced dead shortly before 2:30 a.m. on Tuesday. Golden and Gassick were both pronounced dead from gunshot wounds inside their homes. Police identified the shooter as Paul Mario, a neighbor. Investigators said the shooting stemmed from a long-running dispute between Mario and members of the Tropical East Homeowners Association. Golden was the HOA treasurer, and Gassick's wife was the board secretary. Police said the HOA had been pursuing civil action and served Mario with an eviction notice on October 21st, ordering him to vacate by December 14th. Police also said they had reported multiple prior incidents involving Mario and Golden over the previous year, including requests for trespass warnings, complaints of harassment, and antagonizing behavior, and a report that Mario made a threatening gesture during an argument. Golden later sought an injunction for protection, which the court denied. Police said none of the prior calls led to an arrest or criminal charge before the shootings. With the suspect dead and no additional victims found, police said there was no ongoing threat to the community. Number 2. Southgate, California. On Saturday, November 15th, heavy rain was coming down in Southgate when a shooting inside a home on the 8400 block of San Luis Avenue set off a chain of events that ended with 3 people dead and 1 woman taken to the hospital. The first report came from inside the house. Around 2:27 a.m., a woman called for help and said that a man inside the residence was firing a gun. Southgate police moved to the address in response to the call. At the front of the house, officers encountered an armed man coming out through the front door. The exchange happened right at the threshold. He fired several shots toward officers positioned outside, and officers fired back. He then turned and went back into the home. From outside, officers reported hearing additional shots coming from inside after he re-entered. Officers entered and pulled out a woman in her 70s who had been shot. She was transported by ambulance, and authorities later described her condition as stable. While clearing the home, officers found 2 women with gunshot wounds and pronounced them dead at the scene. They were identified as 25-year-old Ebony Plancart and 52-year-old Maribel Vasquez. Medical examiner listings recorded both deaths as homicide, with Plancart's cause of death listed as a gunshot wound to the chest. The shooter was identified as 51-year-old Eduardo Vasquez. He was found dead inside the residence from a gunshot wound. Early summaries noted that it was unclear whether any police gunfire struck him. Investigators described the case as domestic violence and said the suspect and the 3 women were related. Reporting based on law enforcement sources described the dead women as the man's ex-wife and stepdaughter, with the wounded woman described as a grandmother. The same sourcing said the man lived across the street from his ex-wife and that a domestic violence report had been made in 2024 but was later recanted. A firearm consistent with the one used during the exchange at the front door was recovered at the scene. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's homicide detectives assisted Southgate police with the investigation, which was handled as an officer-involved shooting case. The investigation remains active as detectives work to finalize circumstances and confirm the relationships involved. Number 1. Newark, New Jersey. On Saturday, November 15th, around 7 p.m., the 300 block of Chancellor Avenue in the Newark South Ward, near the Chancellor and Leslie area, where small businesses sit close to apartment buildings, was still active with people in the corridor. The shooting happened on that block and hit 5 people in one burst of gunfire. 10-year-old Jordan Garcia, his 11-year-old brother Jason Garcia, 21-year-old Kia Mae Scott, 19-year-old Massey Rogers, and 60-year-old Shepard Miller. Jordan and Kia Scott were rushed to University Hospital and both died that night. Jason Garcia survived and was listed in stable condition. Shepard Miller was also injured and listed in stable condition. Rogers was hospitalized in critical condition and initially survived, but he later died on Thursday, November 20th, becoming the third fatality tied to the attack. Early in the investigation, officials said they had surveillance video from the area and were canvassing for additional footage and witnesses. A $10,000 reward was offered for information leading to an arrest. Police did not announce a motive, and they said they were still working to determine whether the shooting was aimed at a specific person or connected to an earlier incident that day. Prosecutors later announced 4 arrests: 31-year-old Almeda Thomas, 26-year-old Quayon Williams King, 19-year-old Furquan Boykin Jr., and a 16-year-old. Investigators described Williams King as the driver who brought the group to Chancellor Avenue in a stolen vehicle, with Thomas also inside. Prosecutors alleged Boykin Jr. and the 16-year-old were the two who ran in and opened fire, striking all 5 victims, then got into the vehicle and fled. Detectives also linked the group to stolen cars used around the time of the shooting, including a vehicle later found abandoned and burned. A second stolen vehicle tied to the investigation was involved in the police chase on November 17th that ended with Williams King in custody. 2 firearms were recovered from that vehicle, but authorities said they did not match the guns used in the Chancellor Avenue shooting. All 4 defendants were charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of second-degree aggravated assault, and conspiracy to commit murder. Thomas and Williams King also faced additional charges tied to motor vehicle theft and aggravated arson connected to the stolen vehicles. The suspects remained in custody as the investigation continued, with the motive still under review.